Ho, ho, ho. Episode 23 of the Master Keys podcast. In this episode, we talk about big changes in inclusionary zoning in Toronto. We talk about a landlord who threatened to deport his tenant. And Neal is going to tell us a little bit about being a business owner. Check us out wherever you listen to your podcasts.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.
All right. What is going on? Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Joyous Kwanzaa. All the holidays, you and yours. Hope you're having a good one. Thanks for spending some time with us. Hopefully this is you getting a moment of escape from your loved ones.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never really listened to podcasts, but the first time I listened to a podcast was
Family dinner.
to and from Cape Breton, where I go to spend awesome time with my lovely extended in-law family. They're fantastic.
Is this called backpedaling really quick here?
No. I tell them, I'm like, listen, I'm exhausted and I need to go upstairs and lie down for a bit because it's like 60 to 100 people inside a small 3-bedroom home. And my family's not like that. We're a very small family. Yeah. And like our Christmases, we'd wake up in the morning, we'd do our thing. And then we'd just go to the four corners of the house. My dad would read whatever Tom Clancy book I got him. My sister would go off and read whatever. I would go and watch World Junior Hockey and, you know, the triple header on NBC basketball.
Plan out your developments.
Yeah, and my mom would be like cleaning up. Everything was like, well, that wasn't worth it. You know what I mean? I started listening to podcasts when I was in Cape Breton with my in-law family whenever I need like a little break. So hopefully we are providing that same reprieve for someone out there listening. And
yeah. Hopefully it's going well. So yeah, episode 23, Christmas Eve edition.
Yep.
We're not really touching on much for Christmas. What are you doing this year for Christmas? You're going back up to CB?
Man, I don't know if they're going to let us in. Right, like travel restrictions are coming tighter and tighter. The kids' sports are sort of shutting down a little bit, and I can't imagine they're going to let us cross the causeway. Us mainlanders, they do not want the risk. So I don't know. It'd be really sad if we can't get up there. I know there's some family that's already out of province, and they're not going to be able to make it home. So not really sure. What about you?
Things are bolting down quick. I'm just local, smaller fam. So we're going to be here locally. We'll do our classic dinners. Go see a few people, but same thing.
Weren't you headed out of province, or you were planning to?
I am after Christmas.
Right.
I'm going to be going out to Alberta, just for about a week. We'll spend a little bit of time there and do New Year's, and then come back. Mm-hmm. So,
it's a weird time of year for work because I don't know about you, but I was mentally sort of like, all right, you know, we're wrapping up, and I think I've mentioned this before on this show where we are kind of judged in our professional field based on the volume we close between January and December 31st.
Yeah.
And so you sort of reach a point where like, well, this time of year, all these deals aren't even closing until next year. And it's so easy to say, well, I'll start fresh in the new year. And you kind of slow down a little bit. And there's also the cyclical nature of the market. Less people are listing their homes the week before Christmas.
Yeah.
So mentally, it's easy to start lagging and coasting. I think everyone does this.
Yeah. You kind of need to.
Inevitably, a bunch of deals pop up, which is great.
Yeah.
Struggling with one deal because of environmental, working on firming up a couple other things. I actually might have another property under offer, but I'm not going to tell you about it for a couple of reasons. But I'll talk about that once the ink is dry.
Duplex?
You're one to talk. Man.
I know.
You're one to talk because do you have a nice 6-unit under contract or not?
Not under contract yet, but working on it.
Are we talking about that?
We can. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to say specific locations, but yeah, there's a couple 6 units that are available that I'm working on. Yeah, and I've shown them to clients, and clients weren't interested. And it's funny when I'm with my clients, sometimes I'll say like, I would buy this, and they think I'm just trying to like sales them, and I'm like, no, like, are you going to write an offer? Because if you're not, I'm going to write an offer. I'll give them first kick at the can, and then if they're not interested,
so these are on market or off market?
Most are on market. There's also some that are off.
Did you take a look at that one that I mentioned to you?
I did. I'm going there actually tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's going on. And then I feel the same thing. I feel like it's slowed down a little bit, just purely on an inventory basis, like you're saying. Like not everyone's listing their houses and that kind of thing. So, and not everyone I think is as keen to shop right now either. Like there's still a lot of really really hungry people, but some people are like kind of fatigued and tired. They spent the last 2-3 months doing it, and they're like, I don't want to think about this right now.
So I want to backtrack a second because I left you off the hook a bit there.
Yeah.
You just were all over me for buying an 8-unit building, and now you're saying you're not looking at one 6-unit, you're looking at multiple 6 units, and one of those is a 5-unit technically. So what's going on?
Okay, let me give some clarity.
Unpack it.
The reason being is I don't have a lot of high end stuff. Like we do our renovations very, very nice. Everything's brand new. So in that sense, they're very nice. But location wise, I don't have stuff that I would
Marquee,
marquee locations or Airbnb style properties. And out of an interest of having maybe one or two of those, because I'd like to get into the Airbnb game, that's why I'm looking at the smaller ones. And any of the smaller ones I'm looking at is purely for the potential of short-term rental. Mm-hmm. I'm not being like, I'm just going to add another 16. I got to refi, I have some cash. Not doing that because I'm still hell-bent that there's going to be a big change in the next year. So I'm starting to stockpile cash. And so that's not what it's for. It's more so I just want some of these marquee locations. At the end of the day, I'm still confident in the long term that they'll always do well. And I want to have the opportunity to gain some of the short-term rental because I have a lot of clients that do it. And every time they show me their Airbnb account, I cry. Yeah. And similar to what we've talked about with the current being a real estate agent, it's a great job. It's changed my life. It's done a lot of things, but it's extremely intensive on a time commitment basis. And so to be able to kind of mix in some other income where there's some concern that the market's slowing down, not necessarily on pricing, but just purely on inventory. If there's just not enough houses and now there's twice as many agents.
Yeah, the deal sample is going to shrink down and down.
The deal sample is going to go down, right? You have less deals going through, more agents. I just don't have the confidence that I can continue at this pace. So I need to now take my income and turn it into something else to get that cash flow. And so that's why I want the Airbnbs.
And I think we're going to do an episode in the new year kind of specifically targeted towards real estate agents and then also maybe targeted towards people who are thinking about becoming a real estate agent, just because we get asked about that all the time because we do it. And I've done it for 12, 13 years. You've done it for less time. So you're almost more current with getting into the industry.
Yep.
I always tell people I'm going to be direct and truthful about it. It's not all roses and sunshine. It can be phenomenal.
Yep.
But it can also be brutal.
Yep.
But we'll do an episode on that in the new year. With the short-term rental, I mean, the cool thing about them being in these marquee areas is that you know you're going to get the lift in a different way. You're going to kind of get it in a passive way. Yeah. It's not because you pay a premium when you purchase the property. It's sometimes harder to get the lift because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm paying so much for it up front.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they support really high-end values, as opposed to say maybe you push the limits and get 175, 180 a door for a renovated unit in one location. It's not unheard of to push the envelope and get close to 300 a door.
500 a door I've seen on appraisals.
For something really small. Yeah, but I mean like for a 6. You've seen 500 a door
on a 6? I've seen like 350.
Yeah.
4. No, actually I just saw a 7 at 510, 515 a door, 7 units.
Jeepers,
in the deep downtown areas.
Holy.
Now, I mean, obviously, you need to be able to get the rents to support that, and those aren't 1-bedroom units. Okay, like they're 2 beds, multiple bathrooms, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But again, you got to look at the comparison for a proper 2-bedroom, 2-bath rental unit. The same thing for a condo would go for $500-600K. Mm-hmm. So realistically, on a comparison basis, there's some value. And I know it's not the same as a condo, but it's something to kind of base off. If a condo is going for $700-800, maybe it does make sense that a rental unit can get to $500 because it's going to rent for $2,300-2,400 a month.
Right.
So,
but at that point, you really probably do have to go the short-term rental to make that worth it.
Well, and so this is the thing. None of these buildings will cash flow on standard long-term rentals. I'm purely looking at them on a short-term rental basis. Yeah. Now, with conservative numbers on the short-term side, it's kind of nuts. Again, like it's just, looking at what you can get for a basic room rate, assuming the worst on everything and your costing.
So I'm not sure how transparent you want to be about this, and you don't have the properties yet. So, but one of the challenges with these, and we talked about it a little bit in our last episode with Igor, financing on your refi, your takeout, where you don't have conventional long-term leases, the lenders don't look at it the same way.
Yeah. No, and you can't. So, and I've had this happen with multiple clients where, first of all, the lender won't allow them to do Airbnb. Like it's literally written into the stipulation of the mortgage documents that you cannot Airbnb. Some also have a percentage of how much of the building can be short-term rental. But yeah, it's not ideal. And I'd probably do half of the units long-term, half on a short-term basis.
Right.
And even then they will likely drop the amount of money that I can pull out of the property.
Loan to value wise.
Exactly. Yeah. Loan to value wise. So instead of getting a standard 75, you might get 65. It can even go as low as 50. But that would be the situation there. So and the way some people are getting around this is they're hiring third-party Airbnb companies that'll sign leases and they'll rent your building, and then they'll go out, basically arbitrage, and they will re-rent it on Airbnb and give you a profit split or a set monthly rent.
But you mentioned a client had trouble with that.
And I was going to say, then the back end of that is, though, now you have one person signing 6 leases, let's say. The bank, still, same thing. It flags the bank because they're like, who is... Ultra Airbnb like corp, and why are they renting all 6 units?
And why aren't you charging them HST? And why aren't you HST registered? So this is another
exactly.
Question. And are you concerned at all that the government on its long list of to-dos is going to come for this business market?
100%. I think the government is going to, and that's why when I look at buying a Airbnb rental property, I know I've heard rumblings specifically in our city that it's going to be based on your zoning in certain areas that you're in. And so I'm trying to target properties that have either somewhat commercial zoning or are within what's considered our center plan now. Because that's what I've heard, is that they're going to base it off the center plan zonings is what you're going to be allowed to do Airbnb in. And there's only a few zonings within that apparently that are going to allow it.
That's very interesting. And I also don't understand why that's fair. I mean, if I was someone out maybe in a slightly more suburban outside the core area.
It still requires a short-term rental.
Yeah, or it still does very well if a short-term rental. I'd be a little ticked by that.
Yeah.
And also, part of the reason they feel that they want to crack down on these short-term rentals is they believe that it is taking away some rental inventory, which it is. Whether it's as much as people think, I don't know. It's funny to kind of think that they might be targeting some, but not the other. I don't know.
I'm sure it'll come out in kind of a weird sweeping way because there's people are, again, they're, like you said, they're screaming that it's stealing all the rental inventory. Again, I think there'll be a giant underworld market that goes on regardless. But for me, I'm just trying to cover my butt and go with commercial based areas that already allow for like motels or bed and breakfast and things like that. Because that kind of helps me lean into the idea that, okay, there should be an opportunity here. Even if they do change the rules, that I'm within an area that technically I could run a bed and breakfast. What's any different here, except minus the breakfast, right? And even that, you can now get companies that'll handle that for you.
Are you planning preemptively to HST register and all this stuff, or not?
That I'm working through with accountants and stuff. It's kind of a TBD thing on what makes the most sense. But I definitely want to do it because I'd rather not get a giant bill on the back end. And there's still, I think, enough money in it. Like it makes sense to do it. Yeah, it's an active business at the end of the day, so it's not going to be paying like a massive tax premium.
People have been asking me about this all the time, and I've always been a little bit wary. And it's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about today, which is about starting a business and all that stuff. We can get to that in a minute, but it's just a different world, and people assume it's the exact same. And maybe you can get away with like one in your basement, or you have a duplex and you do a couple of them. But if you actually want to scale it up, your insurance should be different.
Yep.
You have to be HST registered.
Yep.
All of these things are going to be different. Your financing, even if you can get into it initially with conventional financing on any refis or future plays that we talk a lot about, it's going to be different. And then there's just the fact that it is a business.
Yeah.
You have to set up some sort of systems to make it work. But we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into this. Yeah. What else is kind of going on in the news? Or actually, I should mention I closed that property, right? I think we were kind of talking about that last time.
We talked about that last time, and you'd made a video. So you're closed. Yeah. You had a few people up and end on you, or one person, I think, leave on you and crank the heat.
Yeah, one person is out, and another just said that they're going to be leaving end of the month. So from my perspective, that's fantastic. I want to get in there and do these renovations. I actually started, or I didn't start, but I started kind of working on the place here, and they were draining some of the hot water radiator lines because the hot water rats were getting ripped out, and they were just draining it down this floor drain, right, or like a hole in the ground. And out popped 2 rats coming out of that hole. The reason being is like it's scalding hot water sent down there, and the rats were like, "Oh man, we're getting out of here!" And they just run right up. And then I'm like, "Where'd they go?" They're like, "We don't know." They scurried off
into the building.
I'm like, "Oh man!" And like, well, if it's any consolation, they look like they knew where they were going, so they're not new to
running
the
around this building.
Yeah. And the other thing, I almost brought it in because we've talked about it, and I thought it was funny, and I forgot to bring the darn thing in. I go there, and there's this Halifax water notice that's like, "We're about to disconnect your water." Because I forgot to set up utilities.
Oh,
like we've always talked about. I forgot to set up the water utilities, which is a bit of a running joke, but I got that done today. So taking over that building, which is super exciting. Looking at another building that I'm, really excited about. What are you laughing about?
No comment. No comment.
This guy's such a hypocrite. And we're not even going to get into your purchases. What else is new out there in the news? There were some changes to Toronto zoning or some proposed changes.
Cutting you off before we go there.
Yeah,
I am going to talk about my purchases real quick because I want to make this a point for some people just in case they're trying to learn. So the 19 units that I've mentioned 89 times.
Oh, yeah.
It's finally closing today, which is exciting. Took it's really only a 9-day delay. That's really not that crazy.
That's not bad, no.
Anyways, the thing I really want to point out with it is on closing day, myself and the broker overlooked the fact that the bank had decided to do a holdback because they didn't feel the cash flow was there. So I have an appraisal that's actually higher than the purchase price. And we had agreed on everything 25% down. And on the front page of your mortgage document, it shows a 75% loan. Like it shows the full amount. 3 pages
Gotta read the
deeper.
fine print, Neil.
Yeah, 3 pages deeper on this 80-page document, they talk about how due to the fact it doesn't maintain cash flow, they're actually going to hold back $50K. And I was doing a refi at the same time, and they're holding back $50K off of that as well. So $100K total.
Till what? What are they waiting for?
Well, this was my thing. And so I was like, oh, and they said it's due to the fact that we're concerned about making payments. And so I'm like, okay, so you're putting the $100K into an interest reserve? No. A payment reserve? No. So my payments are still due in full.
And $100K less on your payments is what, $500?
Maybe.
So they're worried about
$350. Yeah, $400.
That's more
Let's say five. Let's say 500 or 600, whatever. But like, regardless, it's irrelevant money really in the grand scheme of things.
It is. Yeah.
And then on top of that, now I have $100K less in my checking account to make those payments. So for me, it made no logical sense at all. But this is what can happen on some of these deals, and this is why.
That's a pretty key oversight.
That is a key oversight, and it was due to the pressure that was kind of taking place to try and get everything closed. But I kind of get how it happened because, again, it wasn't on the first couple pages that outline everything that you're getting. It was further buried down. Like we both everyone missed it until closing
Even
day.
the lawyer, right? Because the lawyer would have the actual mortgage instruction package.
The lawyer called me and was like, "There's a $100K holdback. I don't really know what for." And they were like, because she said she requested the funds. And they landed, but they were missing a bunch of money. And I was like,
short $100,000.
They were short $100,000, and I was like, what? I don't know. So, anyways, it's just these are things that come up, and it does happen on single family homes and regular purchases too. But usually, it's a few $1,000s. In this case, as you go up and up, it gets to be more. So, it's just something to be considerate of like when you're buying and making these investments.
But again, like
make sure you get a bit of wiggle room because
so they're going to say
things like this can happen.
Once you get the rents up a little bit more towards market, then they're going to release those funds. Is that the idea?
That's what I'm literally working through that right now. I haven't been able to get an answer because someone was here, someone was there, and we're just trying to get closed. So I dropped the money off, get it closed, and then I'll figure it out.
You were looking at pivoting between a lender that you'd worked a lot with recently.
Yes.
And then someone you were trying new who kind of was dropping the ball on this. So
and they dropped it completely.
They dropped it completely. So you pivoted back to these other folks that you had this longer relationship with.
Yeah. And they were great. They stepped in fast and everything, like the term looked almost identical. And except for that, basically that clause. That was like the one thing. And there was mention of it, but never of the exact dollar values or what exactly they were doing. And like I said, with all the other companies, they've done what's like an interest reserve, where then it makes sense. Okay, so we're concerned you're not going to
aside. Yeah,
we're concerned you're not going to make the payments or be able to make the cash flow. So we're taking it now and we'll put it against your payments. That's what the other banks have done when I've bought properties like this. In this case, they just said, no, you just got to put it down. I'm like, okay, so like you said, my payment's now down $500 a month, but the total payments are the
$500 is going to be
exactly. It's over 31 units, so the $500 is irrelevant, really.
Right.
So
bummer.
Anyways, long story short, we're getting her closed up. I'm still kind of fighting with them because I want to get that $100K released through a draw or something. Because I said we bought this as a construction project, like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, still excited. It's going to work out well.
Me and Tanner are going to loan you the money at 13%. That was our big plan, but
it's cheaper than I usually pay.
Well, at least you're getting it closed. And sometimes it's just you pound through it, you get it closed, and you just, especially with everything that's going on right now, I just look at it as you just have to put your head down and work on it.
Yeah.
Like at this new building, I'm there regularly. I've got open conversations with every tenant there, and I'm just working on it a little bit every day and moving things in the right direction. So,
100%.
What else is going on in the news?
So, you were going to it there. Toronto passed kind of an intense new zoning law. It's something that got thrown around here, and it's exclusionary zoning. And basically what that is, I guess people know what zoning is. Zoning is what they put on a parcel of land to dictate what can and cannot be built, or what can and cannot be done on that land. And so those also dictate, like, within a building, if you're doing 80 units, you must have 20% as 3 bedrooms, 20% as 2 bedrooms.
One has to be accessible.
All these different things, the spacing, all those things. So now within that, they've now modified it to also include, the unit breakdowns need to include affordable housing units.
Yeah.
I don't think the exact specifications of what defines the affordable housing was 100% laid out. But what they're saying now is, to start, they want to say any new condo developments within a certain area must have 5 to 10% of their units as affordable units. And the affordable units must target people between $30K a year to $90K a year.
Yeah, and it's going to be 30% of your income.
Okay, yeah. So they will have a rent value then.
Yeah.
So that's how it's going to work. Now, what's weird about it, I guess, with a condo is technically they're also saying not just affordable rentals, they're saying affordable homes.
Oh.
So I don't know if that means now that you're going to have to sell your condos.
Oh my God, those people are just going to flip those condos.
Well,
there's going to have to be some sort of thing, and then you can't sell it for this many years. And
yeah, how many self-employed people are going to mark themselves down at $89K a year, get on the
I'd
list?
be like, don't give me that raise if I can get a house for 50% less.
Exactly. And then, like you said, just flip it off immediately. So there's going to have to be something going on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, they intend to also increase this to 8 to 22% of units by 2030 will have to be affordable in a new construction build to try and get to their targets of how many affordable units they need to have in the city. I don't know. I mean, there's some merit to making it a requirement, but on the flip side, it's like it's going to boil out that all the extra costs are going to go on the other units. So then you're going to have other people in the building paying 20% more for already insanely expensive housing.
Yeah.
And it's not going to create enough units in a short period of time that's actually going to fill the gap. And then again, where a majority of their construction there is affordable home, or is homes, they're going to be resulting in affordable condos, which I don't know how they're going to monitor, like who's kind of fibbing on their applications to receive it. And it's going to be like, it's going to be like a lottery, basically. Oh, I won the condo. I literally just made $400K today. Like, it's literally going to be a lottery system.
You'll have to enter in a lottery system. And that's similar to the rent controlled situations in other parts of the world, where you might wait 7 years to get a rent control in like a really certain location.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that'll pan out. I mean, this is a tax.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is a tax.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is, if you live in a building and you pay like full value, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And knowing that your full value is about to get marked up a little bit, right? Because
10%, yeah.
You know, the person who owns the building runs all their numbers, and if one number is high, or if one number is low, the other number has to be high to offset it.
Yeah.
Not everyone is going to get the same price per square footage, so you have to charge more price per square footage to compensate for stuff that's getting less.
Yeah.
That's very simple. So unequivocally, some people are going to be paying more so that other people pay less.
Yeah.
You know, that is at the least, it can be referred to as maybe a little bit of tax.
Yeah.
If not other things that, you know, we could get into, but and maybe people are okay with that. I just don't understand why we've been paying all these taxes to address some of these things in the past and haven't been. I also think we're doing a heck of a lot of work in the space of these, what would be kind of, I guess, middle class housing, and that's great. I still haven't seen as much work in the app, like the real deep, affordable, you know, like we've talked about before, $900 and under, you know, that sort of space. And I think that's what actually needs the most attention. But
I think, we've talked about that a bunch of times. I think that's, again, very much a government mandated thing that they're going to have to be involved in and actually probably do it themselves, because you just physically cannot. Doesn't matter if they pass all the rules and laws and just no one would build, because you just physically cannot. There'd be no. You'd be building basically as like a charity thing. You'd be like, all right, I'm going to give up all this money to do it, which is not wrong if you have the money to do it, but I just don't see how people are going to do that.
Yeah, it's gonna be complicated for sure, and that's something that, you know, these things trickle down from big markets into smaller markets as those smaller markets become big. All of these rules have been made for Toronto and Vancouver for all these years that didn't necessarily impact us directly. Well, now as we've grown, they've started to impact us more and more.
Yeah, they also have a rent control in place, and they've had one in place for 10 plus years now.
Then why isn't it working? Why do we need these extra solutions if rent control's there? That should just fix all the problems,
This
right?
is, exactly. And this, again, shows the whole concept of how rent control does not work.
Yeah.
But and they've, it might be over 10 years now, and they've kept it at a fairly low, like 1.5 to 2.5% on average. Like, it's quite low. Yeah, and this is again showing that didn't work for the last 10, 15 years. And it actually, again, yeah, like we've talked about, it kind of killed apartment construction, boomed condo construction. Now they're kind of hitting the condo construction with this. Again, I'm sure it's again a small band-aid solution that's not really going to help anything besides push up prices on the average.
Yeah.
And then give a small fraction of units available. That'll become, like you said, a 10-year wait list. And
I would love to talk to someone in planning and someone that maybe knows a lot of the history of planning, because part of me in my head is like, well, why don't we just build more cities? I know that sounds like a dumb idea, but like part of the reasons the areas around Toronto and those areas were all absorbed is because as Toronto grew and got more expensive, people went to the periphery, and then there just became kind of this mutual growth in these areas. And I've said for a long time about our province here is that our biggest issue is that we have the core, Halifax, which at one point was little municipalities, but like let's just call it Halifax proper.
Yep.
And then nothing else in the province was doing well.
Yep.
And for the viability of our province, we needed something in the South Shore to be doing well, something in the Valley to be doing well, Truro to be doing well, and something in Cape Breton. So you kind of have these little hubs all around.
Yep.
And in the past, they used to do these things where they would just go up the road and build a new town.
Yeah.
And be like, well, things are expensive there, or things are overgrown there. We're just going to open a new town over there. And I met these clients who lived in a town of something like 1,500 people. And it was sort of, they called it like the town that never was. It's called Townsend, Ontario. I was going to look it up because it was designed by planners to be this new industrial town that was going to be set up around these factories and things like that. And it just didn't happen. So the town never really grew. But we're so concentrated now on this idea of like, all right, big cities. And then we're somehow surprised when they're really hard to live there. But as we talked about, we did a cross-country survey of property values, and there's this misconception that everything's just going through the roof.
Yeah.
It's like, no, the major cities are going through the roof, and the rest of the country is just not.
No, it's like it is standard, and a lot of people are moving from those areas into the cities.
Yeah.
Which is causing that force up.
I think from a planning perspective, I know there are disadvantages of spreading people out and advantages of stacking people on top of each other. But from affordability standpoint, if we had more viable regions, maybe that would make a lot of sense. But flipping here locally, there was a story that made the news. And as soon as I saw the headline, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And the headline was something like, landlord charged with extortion.
For threatening to deport.
Threatening to deport a tenant. And so, it's just absurd, as if people need more ammunition to hate landlords. But this seems like quite a character. I guess the landlord in question also works to help people migrate to the country. And so they assisted these people in migrating to the country and then signed, I believe, a commercial lease with them for their business. And then whatever happened, maybe the business dissolved or something like that. The commercial tenants new to the country took steps to exit their lease.
Yep.
And the landlord did not want to let them out of the lease and effectively said, if you try to do this, I will get you deported, I guess.
Brought you into this country, and I will take you out of this country.
I guess so. And then needless to say, he was charged. That's, for criminal extortion.
I think rightfully so. That's a little offside.
That seems a little offside.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on here. And as usual, we're touching base on the metaverse. You've got something there. You're more keen on this metaverse than I am.
I'm keen. I'm just trying to stay woke, Chandler.
Oh,
I think you're sleeping. You still got your BlackBerry and you're sleeping. Okay. I'm constantly seeing this stuff. And so now Bill Gates just made a statement saying that he thinks within 3 years, all meetings will be held in the metaverse effectively. And I guess it just hits harder when it's Bill. Everyone's got a little bit of a trust level with Bill. I mean, he's still, again, another tech guy that's made quadrillions of dollars and done all sorts of stuff that's probably a little bit offside. In general, he's done a better job, I think, of handling his image in the media. And he's done also some really good things like, eradicating malaria? I don't even know. He's done lots of work on that front. Mm-hmm. But it's just, when he says it, I'm like, oh man. Like when Mark says it, I'm like, all right, like Mark Zuckerberg says it and it's all good in the hood. Like he's going on. But Bill goes, okay, in 3 years, I think this is going to happen. I'm like, okay, shit. Like he's probably for real. this is going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I even look at the amount of meetings that I do now that take place on Zoom or Team Meets or whatever the heck they're called.
Yeah.
It's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's already slightly in the metaverse.
I think it's to a point where you can be more interactive and like...
It's going to be further evolved and more experiential. Like it's going to... Yeah.
Bill's an interesting cat, too. Everyone, again, he's good in the media, but like he was about 2 years ago, he was going on... They had this whole thing of like, what's going to happen to society? What's our biggest risk? All this.
Pandemic.
He just kept going, pandemic.
Yeah.
Pandemic, guys. Pandemic's our problem. That's what we got to be prepared for is a pandemic. And then, boom, COVID. And I was like, Bill... Do you know some shit?
No, you know what's really interesting about that? And I was thinking of this the other day, and I
Bill
can't
make
remember. He probably could have. He was like, malaria down, and now I'm going to bring a new one in the mix. I'm going to be first to market. There was something the other day. Slavoj Žižek, who's like this crazy philosopher dude that people might see from YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. He, back kind of post 9/11, like he's big in postmodernism, all this very abstract ideas that at one point in time I cared a lot about. He had this interesting observation about how so many of the terrorist attacks were eerily similar to movies that we'd seen, right? Big things that happen in movies.
The movie came out prior to the terrorist.
Exactly. And so when people convened in the Pentagon, security officials convened in the Pentagon.
They put a movie on.
No, but they actually contacted and engaged big movie production studios to say what sort of things might terrorists look at doing.
No.
And 100%. And if you think of like, everyone's seen the Outbreak movies and the pandemic, you know, these are art kind of prefacing real life, you know.
This is turning into the Joe Rogan podcast on the side now.
No, I'm not saying in sort of any Nostradamus type scenario, but creatives have thought about these things and looked at these things for a long time. And, you know, as humanity, we are naturally infatuated with our own like mortality and, you know, so those have been in movies for a long time. People have been talking about that for a long time, and then it happens, and it's eerily similar to the art we've created and put out in the world because we're so obsessed with this idea.
Keep sliding down this path.
I can't remember what I was talking about.
The Simpsons.
The other day.
Simpsons and predicting everything that happens.
Oh yeah,
that's always
that is pretty.
If you don't know about this, just like Google Simpsons predictions.
Yeah,
and you'll get like a huge YouTube montage for like an hour of all the things that they said, and then 10 years later it happens. Like crazy weird things,
like Trump going down the elevator
and the poster falls, and there's some weird stuff. But going all the way back, Bill said that. I'm freaking out. The other thing I haven't looked into yet is what is Bill doing to profit off of this? Like, he's a great guy and all that, but
metaverse stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what is he intending to be. Like, Zuck wants to be Mr. DOA running the show, like policing this thing. What is Bill? Like, these guys must all get together and be like, all right, like what portion of this?
What piece do you want?
What piece do you want, and who's going to dominate what?
Yeah,
because they're at that point where
I can't keep track of like what Microsoft owns versus what.
They have everyone has their fingers in so much stuff, even just for hosting and all these different items. But anyways, I saw that, and then it hit harder. It hit different, you know. Bill hits different. So
I just want to see when BlackBerry's going to get a piece. Is RIM going to come out and just dominate the metaverse? I feel it in my bones.
That thing's going to get an update, and you're going to be
we're going good
to go. Can someone please, can everyone start commenting, please and thank you for Chandler to get an iPhone, because the videos of him walking around, you can't even make him out.
Yeah, I was going to do a video today, and I felt insecure about it, so I didn't.
I'm happy. If I keep razzing you, eventually you'll cave.
No, it's not going to happen. All right, let's jump right into, or not right into, let's jump 33 and a half minutes into running a business. I know I actually said this to you early in our relationship because you and I met and, you know, kind of like ships passing. I'm like, okay, man, I like that guy. He's hustling. He's doing things. Yep. I'm naturally interested to know about someone, and either from you or from other people around the office, they kind of gave me some background on what you're doing, which I respected a lot. And one of the things I mentioned to you, because I think that respect is mutual, and you kind of commented on the amount of volume I do in sales.
Yep.
And like we've said here before, sales is very transactional.
Yep.
Which makes it, you know, businesses are transactional, but good businesses aren't transactional, really. They're not reliant on just transactions. And I said something to you to the effect of, you're really good at running business. I'm really good at doing business.
Yeah.
And the running of the business is so paramount, especially if you ever want to step back and enjoy a better quality life and do all these things. So that's something I always admired with you. And that's something that you kind of from the outset, we talked about this in previous episodes, you're very focused on and pivoting through different business opportunities. So what do you find? What kind of questions do you get? Like,
well, as I say, we did get some questions sent in from multiple different viewers. So I'll try and hit some of those. And so to say also what business I'm running right now, realistically, the only business outside of already investing in real estate, we technically have a property management company. Being a real estate agent is a contracting restoration company.
Yep.
And basically what
trying to plug them. Everyone's house has just leaked the last week.
Yeah. Rainbow International of Halifax.
Yeah.
It's a franchise. And we do basically insurance work. We're not necessarily like someone you would call to reno your house, but when your house floods, you'd call us. We'd handle mitigating it, stopping the water, removing anything that's damaged, and then also repairing your house and working directly with your insurance company to get that accomplished. But yeah, so I guess starting out, like, this is a first one is everyone's like, how do you choose? Because everyone I talk to is like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to do. I want to have a business, but I don't know what I want to do. There's just no magic sauce. Like we've talked about in earlier podcasts, I did a bunch of different things. Like first thing I did, I was aerating lawns. And then I was selling random crap on Kijiji. And then I was flipping car parts. And then I was importing products and reselling them. And then I was importing cars and reselling them. And so I tried a bunch of different things. And I kind of followed things that I was interested in because it made it a little bit easier to stomach spending my 8 p.m. to 12 p.m. on the computer researching or working on stuff.
Okay, so did you specifically look for a franchise model? Because I always found the franchise model kind of interesting because don't they sort of say, hey, we give you this thing turnkey, you pay us these fees? Unpack like the franchise idea and why you...
Well, yeah, so I'll get there with that. So I did all the other ones and then got into real estate. Real estate became my thing. And then I was like, okay, I was doing my third flip-ish, I think, or second even. And I was struggling to get good quality people and consistently have them there, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a tough part, especially when you're starting out and you don't have relationships with these guys. You might make your 50% deposit, they say a week, and then it takes 4 weeks and it goes over budget, on and on and on. That still happens once you have the relationships, but it's a little easier to pull, especially when you have a large volume of work. So starting out, I didn't have that, and I was struggling a bit. And so I was like, okay, like maybe it makes sense to have a rental company because I know a lot of construction guys.
If I'm experiencing this, other people are probably experiencing this.
Yeah, and also watching online and seeing other people in the city and around, a lot of guys who had contracting businesses did real estate because I'm like, okay, it makes sense because like, oh, well, I can save on the plumbing costs or I can save on the carpentry costs or I can save on electrical because that's what I do.
Competitive advantage. I think I've probably said that a few times. What are your competitive advantages? Obviously, if you're working in the trades or have a contracting company, that can become an advantage.
Exactly. It became your competitive advantage. So then I looked at doing that and I didn't love it for the simple fact that the barrier to entry was low. And there's a million of every one. Whether I was a plumbing company, there's 150 of them out there. If I was an electrical company, there's 150 of them out there. Now, there's nothing wrong with them. If you do a good job of running them, there's lots of money to be made, and they can run well. But I'm always nervous about basically recessions. If you guys haven't gathered yet, I'm always concerned about things pulling back and slowing down. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, what does well even in a recession, or maybe even does better during a recession? Because I said, look, the real estate, when things are going well, real estate's going to be popping. I don't really care how the contracting company does. But when things turn around, I don't want to be holding the bag on real estate, on a contracting company, on and on and on.
But houses flood whether the economy is good or bad.
Exactly. And houses flood.
Yeah, interesting, dude.
Insurance companies always have the money to pay because they're the customer that's paying. And that's the other biggest
And they
gripe.
pay top dollar.
They pay top dollar. And people always gripe that customers don't pay or they bitch and they're fighting about their thing. Insurance, they pay top dollar. They know what they're paying. They cut you the check before the work's even done sometimes.
Okay, so let me just think about that a second. So, filled a need, right? Like you experienced something that was challenging to you, and you kind of took from that, well, if it's challenging to me, it's challenging to other people. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of dipped your toes in it and saw what facets of it had like sustainability and which maybe didn't. Yeah. And then this whole kind of recession-proof idea of, well, even if I am a plumber, a plumbing contractor or electrical contractor, there still may be these ebbs and flows. I'm still ultimately at the end of the day, market transactional. Yeah. And so you said, well, I want something a bit more secure than that. That's really interesting.
And the other thing is, to be honest, even what it says even more so is during recessions, restoration companies actually do better because people are more likely to make an insurance claim. Like there's probably 500, probably more than that, like
right, because they don't have the liquid cash. Oh my God, that's ingenious.
Yeah, see? So, and because right now there's probably 5,000 houses that flooded in the city, and a bunch of people aren't going to bother going through their insurance because like, it's a few grand, whatever, I'll do it myself.
Right. And their deductible might be $5,000. So like, it's $3,500 worth of work. I guess I'm not going to file the claim because my deductible is $5,000 anyway. Even though or maybe they keep it $1,000. They're like, what's
I got a new HELOC on my house. It's 200 grand. Whatever.
Yeah.
I'll pay it and do it.
But if times are hard,
they have to go through their insurance. Insurance does better when times are hard. That's what my thing. I was all about what's going to do better when there's a recession.
This is getting me kind of excited.
Yeah.
I want to invest. Can I get a franchise too?
So that's how that came to be. Now I have a business partner on that company, and he more runs the operation, the day-to-day show. And we talked about it, and that's kind of how we came to it.
Is that Justin?
That is Justin,
Okay.
yes.
Shout out to Justin.
Shout out to Justin, yeah. So we talked about it, and we had looked at a bunch of different businesses. Like we had looked at different franchise models for other things or different other businesses, and we worked together in the past. And we kind of settled on this due to its basically what I like to say is recession proof. Now the reason we went down the franchise model, like you're saying, was insurance companies. Like you can't just say Neal's Restoration,
right?
Call up Allstate in Toronto and be like, "Hey, Neal's Restoration
Send
is open.
us. Yeah,
just send me your 65,000 clients. Like I'm
Yeah.
ready to handle this shit. Let's go." And so to be able to get around that, you have to work within franchise models, and that's why everyone might know the names like Belfour, First Onsite Restoration. Like these are massive multi-billion-dollar corporations that are across North America, if not internationally.
Yeah,
and they build literal contract relationships with the insurance brands.
right.
So all those are obviously already taken, but there's a new one basically coming to town called Rainbow International. Now,
Right. So those, when you say all those ones were already taken, you mean the franchise rights to those were already secured in this area?
either the franchise rights are already taken or they're corporate locations.
Yeah. So they don't have
So
franchisees.
there's no
yeah.
opportunity, and you might have the opportunity to buy one, but the sale prices would be astronomical because it's basically like you're buying a guaranteed book of business.
It's like why a McDonald's franchise or a Tim Hortons franchise are very, very, very expensive.
Exactly. You basically buy the territory and you receive the phone calls. So in looking through that, there was kind of one that's big in the States that hasn't made its entry into Canada yet, but is working on it. And so we saw an opportunity there. And that was Rainbow International of Halifax. They also own a couple other, like a bunch of other brands like Molly Maid, AirServe, Mr. Appliance, Mr. Electric, Mr. Rooter. That's all under the same umbrella.
So they started to get the whole layered.
Yeah, exactly. And here they have a Mr. Electric, a Mr. Appliance, and Mr. Rooter.
Mr. Rooter, yeah.
Molly, they have all of them here already. So it's just kind of adding to that layer. So anyways, we went through the whole process of buying it. And again, the idea was that franchise had the relationship with the insurance, so it would bring in the leads. Of course, we do have to pay a franchise fee up front to buy it. They have a mandatory list of vehicles, equipment, uniforms, and everything, and space you need to have. So we had to dump in about $200,000 to get it off the ground. And then you start paying monthly fees, royalties on every bit of work you do. And
Right.
it differs on what type of work it is because, again, certain types of insurance work are extremely profitable and certain types are not.
So I remember one time you told me though that the strictness of that franchise model actually helped you because in them saying, no, you need an admin person, you need this person, it forced you to hire positions and build out a system that maybe otherwise you wouldn't do yourself.
Exactly. So it was great for me because I was fairly new to real business. Like at that point, everything had been like sole proprietor. I kind of ran the show. I might have 1 or 2 employees or like some hourly people, things like that. This forced me to I need to have a location. I need to have a warehouse. I need to have a certain amount of vehicles. I had to have all this gear. I had to have an administrator. We had to use all these softwares. We had deliverables every week.
Wow.
Which was great. On the flip side,
It's like having a really strict teacher.
yes. On the flip side, I was working for the man at that point. I realized that after that, it kind of takes away all your freedoms and kind of why I really wanted a business, right? Like, again, it's not about as much the money for me as it might seem. Like, I really want the freedom, right? That's what I was looking for. And we kind of lost that in going into the franchise. And additionally, at the same time, my real estate business was taking off. So it was a little bit tough to do it. So, I mean, I guess my involvement now is fairly limited. I run kind of some of the back end stuff. And Justin runs a lot more of the front end of it. And it was a sharp learning curve. We came on, we got kind of busy. At first, we weren't getting busy at all. And then we got kind of busy through some different marketing techniques that we utilized, which we'll talk about marketing another time. But used marketing and was able to get the phone from maybe 1 call a week to about 1 call a minute. Like literally, it was ringing off of the hook. We ramped up. We hired a bunch of people. I think at one point we had like 16 of us all in, which is not crazy. But again, as someone starting
What were the
out-
roles of those 16 people?
So it was a mixture. So we had an office staff. We had an administrator and a project manager. And then we had just crews of people. So we'd have like a lead carpenter with a helper. And then we also had a group of laborers that would do what's called contents cleaning, because within, we had a contents manager too, and then contents cleaners. So within restoration, on top of like your standard stuff that you think of fire and flood, there's mold. Mold is very common. And so mold will impact all of your stuff as well, right? So even though you might have, like most people say, I'll just take a cash out. Well, sometimes you can't cash out a 500-year-old dresser, like, you know what I mean? Right. Or your grandmother's chair. Like, you can't cash that out. So we got to try and clean that and repair that. And so we would bring that back to our warehouse and go through that. So we had hired those people on to do it. We were even receiving shipping containers. So like shipping containers on a ship, which we just had one go by, they leak. Like they will leak sometimes, and it will just damage everything inside the shipping container. And so we would they'd bring the shipping container to the warehouse, drop it off, and it would be someone's entire life in this container. Right. We'd empty it all out. We'd have to clean everything. Pages of a book, like we'd go through all that.
So you built that crew out in pretty quick order.
Yeah.
How did you get the funding to start? Because we've talked a lot about financing the real estate.
Yeah.
You said you dumped a couple $100,000 into this thing, and I don't know if that includes the franchise fee, right? Because typically you have to pay for the franchise fee.
Yeah.
How did you get the liquid capital? What's the financing for this sort of thing?
So we used every opportunity and every option we had. So the first thing is we used, I believe it's called the Canadian Business Loan Guarantee. And so basically the Canadian government gives you a cosign on a loan to get started. And so we got, I think, $50K from that.
That'd be one of the advantages of going through a franchise model, I would assume, too.
Makes it a little easier.
Built-in things, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't give us any real help because, again, they're predominantly in the States. But we were able to say, like, look, here's a franchise. We show them all that. And it was a lot easier to jump through most of the requirements there. In general, it's not a crazy difficult process to get the money. But they partner with the local bank and they give it to you. So we got that, 50 grand. We financed the franchise fee. So to reduce some of the upfront.
Standard personal loan type deal?
Yeah, exactly. Standard personal loan. I think they gave us like a 50% loan. So the other 50% we had to put up. We financed the vehicles. We financed the equipment. And then the rest was cash out of pocket to do it.
So when they're looking at that financing, I mean, you were new to real estate.
Yep.
Right? So did they look at your T4s, your NOAs, or was this they financed based on the strength of the company, or what?
They look at your T4s and NOAs, but I basically didn't have any, to be honest. And so it kind of comes down to kind of a faith thing. And you'll see, like, with a lot of this, like, again, the Canada Loan Guarantee, like, that's who's stepping in there to reassure the bank. For these leases on the vehicles, I mean, like they say, they'll approve anyone. So they were willing to approve it with some certain requirements of down payments and stuff like that. But it's kind of like the person who leased our gear, it's a small company of like 2 or 3 people. And really the main guy, it's literally his money that he's giving out to lease the gear. Like, we couldn't go into some big Jim Pattison leasing and be like, hey, I'm buying $75,000 a gear and I made $4,000 last year.
Right.
He's gonna be like, aha.
Right. So there's a huge leap there.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, not everyone goes the franchise model. We can talk about like where you are in that company now.
Later on, yeah.
But you did some other things that were individual, and this is where I've always struggled with the idea of starting a business. Is I struggle with the thing like, well, I can do it better, so I'll just do it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm sure of those 15, 16 people, aside from maybe like the carpenters and the people who actually had to have skilled labor.
Yep.
There must have been times where you felt like, well, I could do it better than that person. And I know you were forced by way of the franchise model that you had to hire someone for it.
Yeah.
But what do you do with that? You know, everyone wants to wear all the hats in the business. And I know myself, I know that's how I would be. I would struggle to, delegate work and bring people on board because I'm cheap too. There's that.
So I think that's a crucial thing that you learn over time. And I'm still learning it now, is how to delegate and have people handle work. I'm still doing it today. Like, it's like, you still do your property management. I've delegated that off. Project management, I've delegated that off. My administration, I've delegated that off. And I'm not saying like there's lots of headaches, there's lots of hurdles, lots of bumps, lots of things get messed up that I definitely probably would not have messed up necessarily if I did it myself. But that's kind of part of getting there. You can't expect the other person necessarily to operate the way that you would, right? And it comes down to also how good you can be as a leader in that front. That's how I feel.
Yeah, because you can't expect them to care as much as you care. That's just not a reasonable expectation.
Exactly. That's like a number one thing there, that you can't expect them to care. And again, there's certain things that the way you think, they're not going to necessarily think about it that way. And so they're going to have a different way of approaching the item or the task. So I guess getting there was tough. When I first started, it drove me nuts and I always had my hands in it. But I've always, since the start, had it in my head, like, again, this is where I'm like so obsessed with my goal setting that I know where I want to be with it. That I'm like, I need to release these things and let them do it. And I know they're going to screw up. Like, and I know it's not going to go how I want it to go, but that's part of running a business. Like you can't run everything with an expectation it's all going to go 100%. You need to have a margin of error with the expectation that those problems are going to take place. And you do have to apologize on their behalf, but you got to take the onus. Like you never want to make that person feel bad. You show them what you want them to do next time. And again, that's where I think becoming a really good leader, so you can make sure that they get better at what they do, but understanding that the ball is going to get dropped.
So you're kind of stepping back from that now, though, right?
That business now, we're stepping back from it now.
Both you and your partner, he's not kind of taking the ball and running with it?
Potentially. We're just looking at making some changes there where he runs more operating businesses and I run more as an investor. And then now it doesn't really fit into my long-term play. And I realized that after the fact. At the time, it was super exciting and all those things. But I realize now with my goals and kind of the things that I want to do, it doesn't fit the build.
Unpack that a bit. What do you mean?
So again, I set goals like we've talked about where like by 25, I wanted $1 million. I'm not going to go over all the other goals for every other year. But I have goals financially and kind of also for my amount of freedom. Like we've talked about with success, there's an amount of freedom that you get or that you want to achieve to gain success and how you feel about it. So anyways, I have those things and it doesn't fit that build. Be honestly, purely and simple, it's a dollars and cents thing.
Right.
No matter how
you feel you can't scale it?
Yeah, I can't. I can only scale it to a certain level.
Why?
And because at the end of the day, there's only so many houses here. There's already a bunch of companies. There's only so many insurance companies that'll work with me. And it's like it's a business that it's a contracting company. It trades at a certain value based on the income. It's 4x your profits. That's what you're going to get on it. Maybe 5-6 right now because the city's hot. But you're set. So and everyone kind of knows. You can look at every single one across the city based on your population. Your expected is this. You can just guarantee, like if you're running perfectly smooth for 3 years, this is what you're going to make. This is your top end value, and it just doesn't fit the build and the amount of time that I need to put in to get there. It doesn't make sense.
And it sounds like you don't love it, right? Like there are a couple reasons people do what they do. One of them is because they love it, and for better or worse, they go down that business ownership path for a long time, and they never get off because. I mean, I guess doing what you love is reward enough, but you're saying that wasn't what I was doing it for. No. And so it reached a point where now you're going to pivot and look at doing something else. And you scaled up your other business significantly during that time. Yeah. Do you find people like do something that they think they love to their own demise sometimes?
To their own detriment? 100%. I find that, and I think a lot of business owners do that. They're super keen to get into starting a business. I mean, it's kind of a glamorous thing. It sounds exciting. All these things. They love whatever it may be, vinyl wrapping cars, and they love cars. So they get into it, and they can't see the light because what's happening is they're getting into it. They're doing what they love, but now they're working, 80 hours a week, and it's not kind of hitting that growth target that they kind of originally had envisioned, but they kind of keep chasing it. And so you get into the cycle. But the problem is it gets to a point where, now you've taken business loans, and you now have a payroll, and you're in so deep, so you can't just cut it off, right? And a lot of times businesses aren't necessarily worth that much until they pay all those things off and they start cash flowing quite aggressively. And learning all those things is not easy. Just because you're doing it, you don't necessarily just learn it. And the other thing I find with business, there's an awkward stage. Is like sole proprietor where your overhead's low and you have maybe 1 or 2 people. I find you make a ton of money then for the size. Yeah.
Or enough to get really excited and say, well, this is kind of good enough, you know, but eventually you often get burnt out under that model. Like you're doing great, the money's good, but inevitably you can't, because you're doing everything. You can't scale. Yeah.
So then you go to a medium-sized business and now you hire all these people, you add on a location, you add all this branding. Now your overhead's so high, so you're doing 5x your sales, but your cost's actually 5x. So you're still taking home the same dollars. Yep. You're just running this massive expense now.
In the real estate world, we call that teams. Setting up real estate teams. Sounds like the worst thing ever.
Yeah. So then you have
people laugh when they listen to that or not laugh.
Yeah. So then you get to that position and you're like, crap. So it's either then you have to go even bigger, and that's where you really need to have the skills. I think that's where it goes from, doesn't matter how hard you work, that's where some skills come into play that you're going, okay, now I'm going full corp, like I'm going large scale industry.
Yeah, I'm stepping back entirely. I'm the puppet master.
The market has to be able to sustain that.
That's true. Yeah,
there's so many factors at that point. And so I think that people get stuck in that medium-sized business where it's nice, it's a business, and it has some ability for you to step away a little bit, but you still need to be there consistently. So yeah, I would say I see a lot of people to their own detriment get sucked into it. But if they're enjoying their time and they're okay with that, it is very gratifying, like to run your own business and to lock up shop at the end of the night and to see those things happen and or land a big contract. Like there's a lot of things that take place when you have a business that is super, super satisfying. It's even when I first bought this, like I sat up the whole night. We had a hurricane. I sat in the office the whole night next to the phone, waiting for it to ring. It didn't ring.
Oh.
Didn't ring. I thought it was unhooked. But I spent the whole night awake sitting there because I was so excited, right? Like this is the business. Like this is our time. Everything was good. All the gear was lined up. Like the vans were ready to go. We had them parked at the doors, and the phone didn't ring. And everyone was ready. Everyone was on standby. But that's part of running a business. But then I remember the first time we did get calls, it was super exciting. And I remember our first few like major storm events, we got 1 or 2 calls. This recent one, we had a rainstorm. We're not even actively marketing anymore, and we got like 8 or 10. Like it was absurd. Like everyone's calling looking for it. And I'm like, we're not even trying anymore. Like I would have died for that when I first opened.
Right.
But you get to that point too where the business starts to kind of have some of its own residual strength.
So it's sort of like, there's the sole operator just going out there, and sometimes that's the lean, mean, best model. And if people,
that's a great model.
If people love that and they enjoy what they're doing, there's something to be said for not scaling beyond that.
Big time.
And I find the only reason, because it's very similar to what we do in our industry, where people start to talk about, well, I should set up teams. And the challenge is, if someone is looking to work with you for the Neal experience, you have a team around you. We talk about this all the time.
Yep.
The team in our world is, okay, great to connect with you. I'll be overseeing everything. You'll have me as a resource all the time. But in the meanwhile, here's so-and-so, and they're going to be the one out there. And then people sort of feel like, oh, well, I thought I was getting one thing, and I'm getting something slightly different. Yep. And maybe they're okay with that, maybe they're not.
Yep.
But then I always worry about, too, the referral source. It's like, I sent you my sister, and you sent her to someone else. So does that tell me that you no longer want referrals? Or, how do I feel about the fact that, they weren't sent to the same person that I was expecting, and so on. And I worry about that, and I worry about to the point, well, that's part of the reason I never have set up a real estate team. The other thing is, and then this is that middle level, you become so responsible to those people. You have to feed those people around you, and you have to put the systems around them for them to succeed. And there's some teams that do it really well, and there's some that don't do it well at all. And the ones that don't do it well at all, I sort of wonder, well, why are they doing it? And a lot of it is ego. If I look at a lot of these companies that try to scale way too early, and they all do it because of ego.
That's why I did it.
Right? There's one thing to say I've got my own shingle, I'm doing my thing, and I'm crushing it. But that's not as fancy as having like your own office and this, we had a team of this many. Like how many people are quick to fire, like how many staff they have and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
That's the ego play. The people who tend to do it well, probably they reach a point in their life where their personal lives are suffering, or their health lives are suffering, or they're changing their priorities. And then they want to build this team, which is, the next level of business, in order to buy back some of their time. And that's great. That's when it's done correctly. And then the problem is you have to realize the thing that you got into the industry for, whether it's, building decks or framing a house or running electrical, the thing that you actually like, you are no longer in that business anymore.
Exactly.
You are in the people business. And that's a hard thing. And I think between that and between that sometimes it's an ego play is why people don't often get past that middle scaling. And they'll either scale right back down, the team disappears, or, it just dissipates in some other form. But the real hard thing is, I guess, going from that to even beyond that. And it sounds like you kind of peaked out at the middle level, realized, okay, my scaling options here are limited. I would have to replicate this model in multiple jurisdictions. And does that even get me where I want to go? You said no. And you're onto something else. So I guess the people that are looking at getting into a business, it's like, well, do you want to do the work? Do you want to be in the people business? Or do you want to start some big corporate thing? Right? I know you're more interested in the latter, but other people might be at different rungs, because every now and again, people are like, well, I want to do this, and then I'm going to have these many people around me. It's like, well, why exactly? What exactly do you want that for?
Don't jump in too deep. I think that's what you, like, in general, like, if you want to start something too, like, start small. A lot of people say they want to start a business and they're working a full-time job. I'm like, find a way to start it on the side. Do not give up your full-time job. Start on the side. Make sure there's some market demand. Make sure that it actually makes sense. You actually do like it, and do a super small version of the business. And then, okay, now it makes sense. Add some people on it and drag it as long as you can before you absolutely have to then go full bore into it. Because you don't want to make this where, like, I made the mistake. I jumped in so deep We bought so much stuff. We hired so many people. It was an ego thing. Like I was fired up. I was young. I was hiring all these people, and we thought it was all amazing. But the overhead's just burning up like crazy. And so for a few months, everything's fine, and then it starts not being so good when things slow down a little bit. I think you're right.
Also, you lose the part of the job that you liked. Like you were saying, you liked the deal, like you liked the stuff coming in, and then increasingly, that's not what you're doing. You're people managing and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But people are so, and I think it comes back to the ego. Like, are you doing what you're doing because of your ego, or are you doing what you're doing because it's the smartest thing to do? Some people start teams and build these models out of ego. Some people do it for the right reasons, and the latter have more success than the former, obviously.
Yeah.
I've got a couple buddies who work in the food and beverage space, which is notoriously the hardest
Super difficult
space.
Yeah.
It's the hardest space.
Low margin.
It's, a lot of people try it and the vast, vast, vast majority fail. I don't even know what the numbers would be, but it is significant.
Yeah, I mean, you see it. Turnover of restaurants is insane.
Yeah,
Bars and restaurants.
And these guys both absolutely destroy it. Independent of one another. Like they're not in the same business. They're doing two different things. And part of the reason is I've known them for a long time. They are business savvy. They love what they do, but they're very, very business savvy. And interestingly, independent of one another, they both looked at expansion, because one of the challenges with the food and beverage industry is, well, say you have like a hot restaurant and it's crushing.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do to make more money?
Yeah.
Well, you kind of have to like make another restaurant,
which
and
you
hope
see a
that
lot.
crushes as well.
Yep.
But instantly, like you may get some economies of scale with ordering your produce and stuff like that, but that's more people to deal with, more managers to bring on, more space to lease. And they both kind of interestingly, because I talk to them, they're really close friends, and we talk about work-life balance and all this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
They both kind of realized, man, I love my life. Like, had great years in business. I've now set up these systems because they're super smart system guys, like where I don't have to be in the space all the time.
Yeah.
And they're just loving life. And so now they're not going to necessarily expand the way they initially planned.
They're happy at the stage they're at.
They're totally content with it. They struck that perfect balance of like, all right, I'm not a one-person operation who's never really going to get ahead, to I'm going to build out a team, but I'm going to make that team and those systems so damn good that in theory we could expand, but that expansion might actually dilute the profitability, and it would be dollar in, dollar out, or not a change in what they want in their life. And it's a very, very
more
interesting
stress and
realization.
work for not much more coming home.
Yeah, and that's the whole ego thing. It's funny, we were going to talk about a bunch of things off the hop, and I literally skipped over the biggest thing and the one that was at the very top of the list, and that kind of relates to all of this. And it's what's going on. They're calling it either the Great Resignation or the Big Quit.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about it when we go to restaurants and no one's there. Like there's no staff working, and there's a shortage of this labor, and it's something like 2 to 3% of the U.S. like just people have quit their jobs. And in Europe,
turnover is insanely high.
Yeah. In Europe, it reaches as high as 6%. And this was coming out of COVID, right? So obviously there were all this job loss when COVID was at its, it's on a whatever wave now, but when the unemployment hit its all-time high during COVID, there was a lot of people out of work.
Yep.
They all came back, and then a bunch of them just decided to quit. And the long-term reasoning, like we don't really know the causes of that. A lot of it is, wages not keeping up with cost of life, worker satisfaction dropping.
Worker satisfaction is quite low. Like in general.
Yeah. Change of mentality, change of priorities. Even the fact that you just were sitting at home for a while and maybe realize some other interests and how good it is to sit at home. Yeah. Then you have to go back to your crappy job. Like
a lot of new opportunities. I think people they were at home and they might have started a little business that worked out.
This is the thing.
Yeah.
Like the gig culture now is way different than it used to be. And I'm sure, well, we don't have any older listeners, but if they did, they would probably give examples of how people did stuff back in the day too. But I can't imagine a time, at least in my, the last couple decades, where there were this many people piecemealing.
Working in the metaverse.
Well, but you say that okay, dabbling in one thing over here, maybe an investment sort of thing, and then doing this side hustle where they, make and sell or distribute or resell.
People were forced to look at different options and also reflect on what they had going on.
And what they wanted to do.
Exactly.
Right? Especially if you're not going to pay people enough to afford them the quality of life that they want. Well, it's kind of like if I'm going to work for less money, I might as well do it of something that I really enjoy.
I was going to say, what's really good about this? It's forcing up for people. It's forcing up wages.
Totally. It's also leading to things like, they called it. Gosh, what did they call it? Striketober. All right, so in October, like the most strikes in America was kind of happening simultaneous to one another, and a lot of people viewed all of the quitting at the same time as kind of a strike action in itself. These were people walking off jobs in one way or the other to protest, wages, quality of life, and it's kind of the biggest mass union action that we've seen in a long, long time, and the one that stood out for me is that, everyone knows Starbucks, man. There's so many Starbucks out there. And 3 of them in Buffalo, of all places, just ran unionization votes. And Starbucks came in and they actually inserted managers at these locations and moved some staff away from these locations to try to break it up. And one location was unsuccessful in the union vote. They lost, they being the would-be unionizers. Another location, I guess, the vote was still being tabulated, which I don't quite understand. When I looked into it, sure.
How many votes?
But another Starbucks in the Buffalo area successfully unionized, and I mean this is big, just symbolically. But if they made that headway at these 3 locations,
it's going to spread.
Yeah, I mean, Starbucks can't go in there and try these little passive aggressive ploys across all the Starbucks locations.
Yeah.
So there's something really interesting going on with a labor movement, across the world that maybe we haven't seen in a while, even though unionization's at probably an all-time low. These things go in ebbs and flows. But anyway, it's just interesting times for labor. And that's another thing that you have to start thinking about if you really want to be a business owner.
That's a big one now.
Start scaling.
It's a huge one now.
I think there was even a small barista group here in Halifax that looked at unionizing, I think. And I'm pretty sure the owner just went ahead and closed
the location.
coffee shop.
I'm not into that.
So the joys of being a
business owner. Yeah, there's a lot of factors involved. And like you said, being a business owner, the biggest thing is kind of running the people. Once you go past that self-employed stage or sole proprietor stage.
Do you think businesses should start with love or start with money? Like start with the idea of making money or because you enjoy what you're doing?
I think honestly you should start with enjoying what you're doing, which I know is cliche. And I also get that a lot of people don't know 100% what that's going to be, but I think you need to try a few times to kind of see what that is. And that's why I'm so hell-bent on trying to start with a few different little things at home. Like, okay, maybe you want to start a restaurant, but try doing something like a derivative of that, like catering from home.
That's what
you don't need to start a whole restaurant, right? Like and nowadays with Uber Eats, you can literally start a business from your house and deliver off of that. Like I know you're not supposed to do it out of your house and all that, but you get my point. There's options nowadays.
Interestingly, those guys that I mentioned, they both did that in one way, shape, or another. Either made their own drinks or did some catering, or
go work
start
there.
small,
or go work.
Risk. Yeah.
Go work at a restaurant. Like okay,
you got to get the expertise.
You always want to have a restaurant, but you did a degree in commerce, and now you're working at TD Wealth Management, and you're like, man, I always wanted to have a restaurant. It sounds like crap, but you're off on the weekends. Find a place that'll pick up your shift and do it.
You can't go in there with rose-colored. Oh, this should be easy.
When I started doing the car stuff, I worked for free at a car garage because that's what I thought I always wanted to do was have a car garage that did mechanic shop. Yeah, so I went and worked for one for free because we're not going to hire you. You have no skills. So I just literally would go there on the weekends and work to try and get a gauge of if that was something that I was interested in doing. So you kind of have to do some of those things if you really want to know before delving into the deep end.
Can you change a tire?
Yes, I can change the tire.
That surprises me. Does that surprise you, Tanner, a little bit? What? Okay, that surprised me. No offense.
Thanks, Tanner. Thanks, Tanner. Can you change a tire?
Of course I can change a tire.
Oh, he's offended. Of
course I can change a tire.
But yeah, so that's it. So I'd say just to give a little bit of a big lesson I think that I learned too. We're going to talk about this in a separate time, but partnerships, like learning how to set up a partnership, kind of making the decision between people, because I now do it. I've done it with an active business and I've also done it with investing. And I've learned, I'd say a lot, and I think you have as well. So I think we should do one specifically on partnerships because I know a lot of people, especially as costs of everything have gone up, a lot of people are considering doing things through partnerships because a lot of people can't necessarily come up with a couple $100,000 to get things started or to make their first investment. And so okay, I have one other person or two other people I want to work with. So I think we should talk about that. But then, yeah, I think the biggest thing with the business is you need to commit to it as well. And that was something I tried to go too fast. And it was kind of an ego thing. And so it's making sure, like you said, and you described it well, is kind of starting your business working through it, make sure you're enjoying it, continuing to grow it, and kind of taking the baby steps to build a really strong foundation as you grow up. Don't try and be like, okay, in 2 years I'm going to be the biggest builder in the city. Like, you can go crazy and try and land all these contracts and do this. It's going to catch up to you, and it's not going to work. I did that, and it became too much. And so now I'm trying to kind of focus myself, reestablish, take a step back.
Yeah, and remember why you're doing it.
Remember why I'm doing it, and build out proper platforms. And you'll get a lot more satisfaction out of that as it grows, and you'll have so much more strength when the time comes for you to make big plays or to make those moves that you want, because you grew it organically and naturally versus trying to force it in and kind of fake it till you make it. It'll bite you in the butt, and you'll have to get pulled back.
Yeah, and because if you can get that business to be really strong financially, the opportunities to do other things
financially and systematically, like you want to have a good organization,
infrastructure.
like you want to have confidence that when whatever comes in, if a customer's coming in to buy something, or a claim comes in, or you're going to sell something, you have confidence that those systems are in place and it's going to work properly.
Yeah.
That is so important.
It's also like you see how these business owners, they get into one thing and all of a sudden they're in something else and something else and something else, either because the industries are related, i.e. like cleaning companies and plumbing companies would be related to a restoration company. So there's that sort of every chain of the process integration. And then there's just the fact that people bring you business opportunities once you have businesses.
Big time.
But you have to get the initial business really solid.
You see, like you say, it's an ego thing. You start a business and then you're like, oh, I'm a business owner, and then it goes kind of well and you pay your bills and you're like, oh, I'm literally like, I don't want to say Donald Trump because everyone's like, he's the worst business owner ever. But like, I'm Warren Buffett, like, even though he doesn't, he's an investor. But you get my point. You think like, oh, I am the best business owner ever and I have this concept. Maybe not quite to that extent, but you think, okay, I've understood how to run a business. I can now replicate this with other businesses, especially within the similar field.
Right. And
But
some
it's
people
not
are
that
just
simple.
so interested in being like a 10% owner of 7 different businesses.
Also
and
a thing.
some do that in the worst possible way. Some do it in a good way.
Yeah.
But some do it in the worst possible way, like 10% of 7 nothings. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's
not
you
worth
got to
it.
go into it with like no ego and you know, put the systems in
Focus
because
on the
of the right
fact that
thing
it's a
to do. Yeah.
business. Use all the right steps. Try and make sure you have as much money you can have available, and having more than you think. Like if you need 100, try and secure 150K of financing, those kinds of things. And I understand, like we've talked about, it's not going to be that glamorous where you're just always going to have money. Like there's times you got to scrape your credit cards and your line of credit and whatever you got, borrow money from friends to try and make it work. But just trying to be as prepared as you can, I think is important.
I think it's also asking people the same way we talk about real estate. You've got to find your mentors. You've got to ask them. And I bet if you ask them all, they will talk to you about how they started small and they grew the thing. Everyone sees the end product. And actually, I saw this guy I know who sells supplements. He's one of the biggest supplement franchises in Atlantic Canada. And he was talking about how his business started, and it was like with one little kiosk. And I remember that kiosk. I don't think it matters to shut him out. Supplement King, he's
Roger.
good dude.
Yeah.
This is when we were both at St. Mary's, and everyone now would see all the stores everywhere. So if I was someone thinking now like, oh, I want to get in the supplement business, my immediately thought would be, I would need storefront. I need storefront. I need the storage facility that he has, and a blah 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 blah. Well, man, at the time he was selling it, I think, out of his apartment, and he had a kiosk. Yeah. Right. So. People just see the end and not the process, as cliched as that is.
Now you do it online with like a drop shipping. You never actually own the thing. You never actually own the protein. You just
know. That's nothing. That's one of these side gigs, right, that people are doing. But
Exactly.
anyway, that's all the time we have for today, I think.
Yep.
Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you had a great holiday or having a great holiday.
Yes.
And we've got some exciting stuff coming in the new year. We're excited about being in this new space. Do
we got
wanna?
we got one more coming before the end of the new year.
Yeah, that's right. A little recap.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Last
Awesome.
thoughts, Neal?
No, thanks for listening. We have some guests coming on for the next one.
Right.
So that should be good.
Business owners themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Another set of business owners.
Oh, not the next one. The next one after that one. We're doing the recap for the year, and then first episode of the new year, we're going to have some folks on who are running their own business that is real estate related. I'm excited to hear what they have to say and what they've learned.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks for checking out the episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and press the bell button for notifications. If this is your first time here, check out our back catalog for more episodes. Thanks so much for watching.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.